You got Maga Mac here with you on Birds 365, and we got Rick Serritella with a smile on his face. He's all geeked up to be in Indianapolis for the Combine this week. No issues getting into town, Ricky?
Well, a little bit. You know, I've been like Stevie Ray Vaughan this year with the travel issues. If I haven't had bad luck, I got no luck at all, right? So
man.
we're working on it, though.
It's been a bad travel year. I think they do it on purpose.
Absolutely.
Rick.
And people
certainly
ask me,
certainly a certain airline I will not mention, but might have initials of AA. I'd like to.
I was going to say they all suck. You know, people ask me what's the best airline. None of them. You know.
All right, Rick.
Funny.
Now, first of all, before I get into it with you, advanced scout for the Edmonton Elks now. Congratulations. I wanted to mention that. But, and by the way, I'm not I can't call them the Elks, the Edmonton Eskimos. I know it's politically correct, but obviously the CFL. So I'm going to get Jody involved. The best player in Edmonton history. I'm going to go
Wayne
Warren
Gretzky.
Moon.
No questions asked.
Warren Moon, Edmonton Eskimo, Elk. But there was an Eagles great who played for, and I use that term loosely. Anybody know him? Anybody remember? If anybody gets this, I'm going to call them the greatest Eagles fan of all time.
Yeah, not going to be me. I got no idea who you're talking to. You want to take a guess there, Serritella?
Yeah, Johnny Mac came more prepared than the both of us here today.
Anybody remember Gizmo Williams?
Oh, sure.
Gizmo. Yes.
Gizmo was an elk / Eskimo. I did not know that.
He was.
I surely remember
just had
Gizmo.
to throw that in there. But congrats.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we're trying to convince some good football players to come up north, and I'm trying to convince my general manager I know what the heck I'm talking about. So it's been a fun experience.
All right, so that's got to be the first question. Will there be a player who will be doing something, either competing, showing off his skills, just meeting with teams, because different players do different things? My guessing, anybody who's going north to the border with you is better take part in every single workout they offer him this weekend. Will there be a guy who will end up in Canada that isn't quite good enough to make an NFL team?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I've got to look at this kid Gabe Wallace out of Buffalo. Big mammoth tackle, might have to kick inside to guard. He was very good at the Hula Bowl and Tropical Bowl. But I think this year the story that's developing is actually opposite. You got this guy Quantez Stiggers, who didn't play college football, was lingering in the fan-controlled football. Toronto Argonauts took a roll of the dice last year. He was the most outstanding rookie of the entire league. Was down at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I kid you not. He may have been the best player there. If not, he was one of the top 5 players there. I have a 4th-round grade on him. Now, he was coming off an 18-game CFL season, so it was hard for these young kids. I mean, he's the same age, but he's in game shape. I thought it was hard for them to keep up with him. I'm interested to see. The Combine did not invite him to Indianapolis. He's going to have to do his own personal private workout leading up to the draft, but this is a guy who may be the highest non-Combine drafted player.
Things get started today, Ricky. So on-field stuff, and it's going to be, I believe, linebackers, defensive line. Correct? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, 3 p.m. with the shift to, I don't know, semi-prime time, but it used to be just the quarterbacks in prime time. Now they all kick off in the afternoon. So, yeah, 3 p.m.
How do the players like that, by the way? I sitting around all day. I don't know if they like that.
You know, I think the NFL is like a soap opera. You know, you don't hear about what everybody likes. You hear about what they don't like. So, you know, if it's moved in the morning, you hear about how you got to wake up early. Hey, you got to wake up in the afternoon. You know, I don't think you're ever going to keep everybody happy. I think it changes the dynamics, though. In terms of the night scene, like the networking and the ability to just turn around and be suddenly having a beer with Jerry Jones or Bruce Arians, those days are kind of over because you don't have the NFL personnel out and about until very, very late night, which is past my bedtime. But it used to be a kind of smorgasbord of who's who, but now you have the teams in meetings, having to watch the Combine at night. And also the NFLPA did away with the mandatory agent meeting, so you don't have a lot of those kinds hanging out. So I'd say the night scene, which some of the younger audience might appreciate, has kind of died down in years.
What do you think of the teams like, I'm going to call them on the carpet because they started the whole thing, the Los Angeles Rams, who aren't there. They had scouts there. The general manager's not there. The head coach isn't there. The two coordinators aren't there. They just think they can get all the information they need sent back to their offices. And today at 4:30, when defensive linemen are working out, I'm guessing that the head coach of the Rams might be actually surfing, but he doesn't need to be in Indianapolis. Is it just dumb? Is it flying in the face of what has been in place forever? Am I too old school to think that you have to be there? What do you think about teams that have just said, combine, schmombine, I don't need to show?
I think COVID enabled a lazier work environment, and I hate to use that word because it worked. I mean,
when I use,
well, but the Rams started doing this the year they won the Super Bowl, so it's kind of hard to argue the logic. Hey, it worked. They continued to do it, and you see some of the younger coaches. Matt LaFleur is not there. Robert Saleh is not there. Mike McDonald is not there. I think that the players, I think a couple things, right? The players have been so coached up for these 15-minute date dashes. I don't think teams are really getting a whole heck of a lot out of those things. The medicals are what they truly value. And, I think for everything that you're there for, you do get all that data and the end results there. You are able to watch it at home. So, I mean, I'm always a big believer in the eye test. I like to see it. With my own eyes personally, I'm always going to be old school like that. But you do have this younger influx of talent. And I wrote about this in the latest article, like the NFL, like Indianapolis had to outbid Dallas and Los Angeles to keep the combine the last 2 years. Now they have it through next year, but should this thing start hopping and bopping around, I think a lot of these teams might give the double middle finger salute to the NFL and say, you know what, take your prime time programming and shove it, where I'll be back at home watching,
Yeah, I think we're going down that route, Rick. I think you're right. Indianapolis has been able to stave it off for, I think, longer than most of us thought. But I think ultimately they're going to tour. And if they're not going to tour, it's probably going to be LA and the media campus by SoFi Stadium, so to speak. So I think ultimately that's where we're going to go with this thing. And we'll see how that shakes out as years progress. But the linebacker start today, that's a big, important position for the Eagles, not from a value standpoint, but from a need standpoint, because they can't seem to get it right. Obviously, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. spoke yesterday, so that was a big thing around Philly. I think I saw about 17 articles for the obvious comp, and everybody wants him. What do you think of him as a prospect in his fit and what he can bring to an organization, whether it's Philadelphia or anywhere else?
You said Trotter, right?
Trotter, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, he's got pedigree, big time recruit. Father was in the National Football League, and he brings a lot of those similar traits. I think he flies to the football, not bad in coverage, can drop back if needed. So I think he brings experience, leadership, pedigree, somebody who's going to come in, I think can compete immediately for a starting job. It's funny, these linebackers have been devalued so much over the years that I don't know if one of these guys sneak into the first round. If they do, Cedric Gray from North Carolina, I think, is a guy that's going to kind of tear the roof off of Lucas Oil Stadium today. I think he's going to run faster than a lot of the running backs who are in Indianapolis. So that would be my candidate. But I think Trotter's right there at the top of the group. And Junior Colson out of Michigan, if you look at his backstory and where he's come from, this kid's been fighting his whole life. Just a great player and even a better individual. So I think those are some of the guys at the top of the board. But I actually like the depth in this year's linebacker class because I think there's some value here. I do, yeah. Like Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State. Like this kid might, pound for pound, he might be the best linebacker in this year's draft class. Now he's got some injuries, right? We talk about the medical in the combine and what that's going to look like. We don't know. So I don't know where he ultimately lands up. If he's a day 2, day 3 guy, that's great value. I think he's going to be a steal. I think James Williams out of Miami is a guy that might slide a little bit because he played safety for the Hurricanes, we showed up down in Mobile and we're informed he's going to be switching to linebacker. So he practiced that linebacker all week at the Senior Bowl. And you talk about a guy who played safety, who can fly around. You know, you got a safety and a linebacker body that could fit what, you know, Philadelphia is looking to do. So James Williams out of Miami, another one of those mid-round picks. But going back to Trotter, you know, you could state a case, you know, that he's the best linebacker in this year's class. And his running mate, Barrett, who went back to school, a lot of people actually thought he was a higher rated linebacker prospect, Barrett Carter, I believe. And so he'll be a guy to remember for next year's draft.
All right, good to hear that you think it's a deep linebacker draft because the Eagles aren't going to be using a high pick on a linebacker. Jody McDonald prediction. I want to have you compare 3 different positions because John and I have gone back and forth on this a couple of times. I think if I were guessing, projecting what position the Eagles are going to draft at number 22 with their first pick, I would put corner above all other positions. John's been kind of leaning toward a tackle because the Eagles do put extra value on the offensive line, the trenches in general, but certainly offensive line being one of them because there's depth in that group. And if Hassan Reddick is going to be traded, I think Eagles have to consider a pass rusher as a possibility there. Give us your group rating of those 3 spots: cornerback, defensive edge, offensive tackle. Which one is, if you're just looking at depth at the position in the first round, I'm talking about at the top of each of those, which is the best position for this year's draft?
I think that's an easy one for me. Offensive tackle would be the position I would wait on because I do think somebody could slide into the second round. Everybody knows about Joe Alt, Notre Dame, Fashanu, Penn State, Fuaga, the Oregon State kid. But, I mean, somebody's going to slide, whether that's Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, J.C. Latham from Alabama, Jordan Morgan from Arizona, who doesn't have the arm length, but might be as good as any tackle that I saw. And he's probably a second-round guy. Or Marius Mims from Georgia is a first-round talent coming off of an injury, so he could be had in the second round. I'll tell you another guy, Dominic Pooney from Kansas. This guy was unbelievable at the Senior Bowl. I think he's a guy that could possibly start along with Christian Jones. So I just rattled off 9 guys at tackle that you could probably
It's amazing.
Start.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable with the tackles. Now, pass rushers, if you wait, you're out of luck because there's just not a deep class. If you wait in the second round, the good ones are going to be gone. I think Chop Robinson out of Penn State is a candidate to be there for the Eagles, and he's kind of got similar dimensions, frame, size, speed, athleticism, burst. Chop Robinson from Penn State is a guy I think.
You like Chop Robinson?
Well, I like him in this year's draft class compared to who else is out there. You know, Latu from UCLA. I think he's a little bit up and down. I think he might lack the necessary strength from what I saw at Mobile. I got questions about him. The top guy, Dallas Turner from Alabama, is going to be off the board.
Right.
You know, after that, you know, Jonah Ellis from Utah might be a day 2 guy that I'd be curious. You know, he's got these big, wide arms, long wingspan. But, I mean, it's slim picking. I mean, Andre Isaac, Chop Robinson's running mate, is somebody who has generated a buzz here, but his production isn't really there, right? So you got to wonder, like, how much coaching up does that guy need? And, you know, Avonte Maddox, I think, has been a problem. Darius Slay is a year older, as is James Bradbury. You know, I think cornerback, you know, Maddox, to me, I don't know if he's a free agent or not, but it's like he's never even on the team. He's always hurt this guy.
He's got to get his contract redone or he's going to be released. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, they start moving these pieces around, and I think the Eagles left themselves a little bit vulnerable there on the back end, and we all know the back end is attached to the front end when it comes to the Eagles defense.
All right, well, let's talk corner, Ricky. You know, the Eagles start the process at 22nd. So obviously that's been my mentality with tackle. If you're forced to stay at 22nd, you know one of those tackles is going to fall because they can't all go. So you know you're going to get a real good value if you stay at that position. But if you want to improve and you want to target somebody, I see Terrion Arnold. I see Quinyon Mitchell probably aren't going to make it to 22. Do you agree with that sentiment? And how many corners could be worthy of that particular pick if the Eagles are forced to stand pat?
Yeah, I do agree. Arnold and Mitchell, I think, are 1 and 2. I think Arnold right now is the first one off the board, but I'll tell you what, Quinyon Mitchell, that's one of my, I guess, man crushes in this year's draft. I mean, this kid is big, he's physical, he's tough. This is the guy I want for the Eagles if I'm Philadelphia, because he fits exactly what they need, Quinyon Mitchell. And I think Howie Roseman might be a little bit aggressive and target that guy and maybe move up for him. If not, guys, Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy out of Alabama who was probably the consensus #1 corner coming into the season, and he brings some return ability as well. So that's another need that he might be able to fill. I think he'll be there on the board. And then also like Cooper DeJean. Do you have some great Papon out of Iowa? He was unbelievable, throughout his career for the Hawkeyes, fundamentally sound. Some people like him at free safety. I don't buy it. I think, if he's running here in Indianapolis, I think he's going to be in the 4.4 range, has that 6 foot height. That's the one thing that you notice. It started back around circa Richard Sherman was kind of when we were introduced to these like predator type defensive backs. I did the all-star circuit. There's all these 6'2", 4'4", 4'5" cornerbacks now. It's like if you're not 6 foot and run 4.4, we don't want you. That's what you're seeing an influx of every year. We talk about bigger, stronger, faster. I'll give you a couple dark horses here. I like Nate Wiggins from Clemson. I'm not sure if 22 might be a little bit rich there, but Kalen Carson from Wake Forest, nobody talks about him down there in the ACC. I thought Kalen Carson is a really impressive, good-looking cornerback, and I would consider him at number 22.
What about Lassiter? Because it's Georgia and it's the Eagles.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. The Georgia pipeline. So I thought Lassiter maybe had a little bit of a streaky season, up and down. The scouts didn't really see the consistency there, so he might slide into, I think, early second round range. I think 22 might be a little bit too high. He comes in that, again, everybody's looking for those 6 foot tall, lengthy corners. He comes in, I think, at 5'11", 5'10", and change.
All right, Ricky, John and I both kind of agree on this one. The guy who's going to get the most touches for the Philadelphia Eagles coming out of the backfield this year is to be determined. That he's not on the Eagle roster as of right now, and it could come via free agent signing, or it could come via the draft, and we don't think they'll use any of their top 3 selections. They got a 1 and 2 twos, but sometime thereafter could be a running back selection for the Eagles, knowing that that's where they're going to pick. So you probably take the first handful of backs out of the equation, but not much more than that. How good a running back class is there in this year's draft?
Well, thank you for shedding some light on the running back class. I can't tell you how many shows I do, and we don't ever talk about running backs. It's like it never even comes up, And so for me, I have Trey Benson out of Florida State as my #1 rated running back. I don't know if he gets chosen in the top 40 picks. Maybe not. Maybe Jonathan Brooks out of Texas gets chosen ahead of him, but he's got an ACL, and I don't think the Eagles want to wait a year for him to rehab back. The guys that I would be looking at really is in the day 2 range. Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. You got a guy here who's going to come in probably around 240 pounds, 6 foot plus, and he's going to run in the 4.4 range. I mean, this guy is, somebody that makes defenders make business decisions. So Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin would be a guy that I like. And Marshawn Lloyd out of USC, day 3. I think he has the ability to be that first and second down back. Just ran with nasty violence at the Senior Bowl. Like, this guy was just pissed off all week. They talk about angry runs. That's Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. I think he could be a first and second down back, and he's got the shimmy to kick it outside if need be.
Nice.
So one more who was not invited to the combine. I think it's very disrespectful. Blake Watson out of Memphis. I had a chance to see this young man against Temple late in the season, slapped the mid-round grade on him. He was the Hula Bowl MVP. I saw him at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Frank Gore's son had that big run in the game, so they gave him the MVP. The real MVP was Blake Watson out of Memphis that week and for the game. He did not receive a combine invite. This is one of my I have him ranked at number 10. I actually like him more than that, and he's not in Indianapolis. Remember that name, Blake Watson.
Why does something like that happen, Ricky? Is it politics? Is it more there than meets the eye? Why would a guy who plays well in the All-Star games? I know they didn't give him. They start to formulate the rosters before the All-Star game, and then if he's not in the mix, that they don't adjust.
Yeah.
How does something like that happen?
So you know, and Jeff Foster does a great job. I don't want to knock the process, but one tweak or one change I would like to implement would be to extend or have a second wave of combine invites, because basically what happens is every team gets a vote and they vote on every player, and Jeff Foster gets the 33rd vote. And usually the magic number is somewhere around 18 to 20 votes. If you get 20 votes, you usually get a combine invite. And so this is all conducted in December. So a guy like Blake Watson, he goes and blows up the All-Star circuit. These votes are already conducted. Now, Brandon Thomas was the starting running back coming into the year. He got hurt in training camp. Here comes this transfer, Blake Watson, that nobody really expected much of anything. He tears it up. He starts, you know, getting these All-Star game invites. Well, you know, not enough scouts went in there recruiting or scouting Blake Watson, so he didn't get enough votes to qualify. And I think, you know, that's a small wrinkle in the process. I think that needs to be ironed out.
That's interesting, Rick. That takes me down a route. I want to ask you about sort of these hybrid players. These you mentioned the safety, the Miami safety played at linebacker at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
How did those decisions come about? Is that just sort of a group? The NFL says, we think this guy, you know, if there's enough votes, we think this guy's more of a linebacker. We want to see him there. Then you have the Brian Flores of the world who just play people all over the place anyway. How has that shifted, or has it shifted things that much?
I think it's case by case, because like for James Williams, he came in at 6'3" and 4/8" measurements. Now I think he played at 228, but he was 240 pounds at the Senior Bowl. So that tells me, like, hey, they probably got him into that combine training facility, you know, maybe started testing him, saw the frame, and maybe it's an agent decision based on the feedback he's gathering from NFL scouts. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe he should pack on 10 pounds and be a, you know, fly around linebacker. I think also when you get down to the Senior Bowl, you do have scouts that put in a request with Jim Nagy and say, hey, I'd like to see this player. You know, the quarterback, Malik Cunningham.
Yeah.
Scouts wanted to see him play wide receiver at the Senior Bowl. He refused. He said, no, I'm a quarterback.
Good for him.
Okay. So, you know, it's a case by case. The player might not be open to that. You know, I think Logan Thomas was a guy who was open to that, because he knew if he wanted to extend his career, his best shot is going to be at tight end. A couple other hybrid guys like Dylan Lawbay out of New Hampshire. Okay.
Yeah.
This kid had 256 receiving yards in a game. Like, he plays slot, he plays running back, he can return kicks. He's probably going to go day 3 because he's out of New Hampshire. But he hit 20 miles per hour, 20.4 on the catapult, one of the fastest players down at the Senior Bowl. Is he a slot guy? Is he a running back? Remember Danny Woodhead? He's kind of one of those guys. Brandon Dorless from Oregon was playing defensive tackle and defensive end at the Senior, because he's like 6'3", right around 268, 270. So, like, can he stay at defensive end? Sometimes it looks that way. Sometimes I feel like, you know what, maybe he should pack on 10, 15 pounds and just use that twitch on the interior. So you do have guys, you know, back in the day, we used to call them tweeners.
Yeah.
Now they refer to them more as hybrids. But I still think that guys like James Williams and Dylan Lawbay, I think they get knocked, because unless you have, like, Isaiah Simmons was a high draft pick, but they really didn't know how to use him.
Nope.
So if you don't have a specific role when you take somebody, I think that's where guys can get caught up, lost in the mix.
Well, we were talking about Hassan Reddick and everything going on with him and the trade market and the NFL. I mean, you said 13th pick in the draft, but, you know, you got teams saying he's an off-ball linebacker, which was a big mistake by Arizona. They didn't know what to do with him, and they took him 13th overall. Simmons the same way. Great athletes, and you try to figure it out, it seems, on the back end. I don't know if that's the best way to go about things.
Well, you know what? That actually reminds me of Christian Braswell out of Alabama and Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. Some people prefer them as off-ball linebackers. I prefer Edgerrin Cooper, especially out of Texas A&M. I think he could be a pass rusher at the next level, and I think there might be some teams that are kind of divided on those two guys, and maybe the Eagles see a little bit of Hassan Reddick in Braswell or Cooper, and that might be somebody they target. But those two guys came to mind as you're talking about Reddick coming out of Temple. I do believe he was on so many teams. Was it the Panthers or the Cardinals? I think he was an off-ball linebacker. Then they figured out, hey, let's let him get after the quarterback. And
even more recently, Micah Parsons. I mean, how many teams wanted Micah Parsons? Jody knows. I take victory laps over that. I'm like, that guy's a rush. That guy's a pass rusher. But he had the short arms, and he's 6'2" or whatever. No, you got to be. He's a great athlete moving to off-ball linebacker. I'm like, that's insane. That's insane. And by the way, if DeMarcus Lawrence doesn't get hurt, I think the Cowboys are still playing him at off-ball linebacker. He's probably on his second contract somewhere else. As crazy as that is. Yeah.
And that's why I don't grade players by the length of their arms. That's the most ludicrous and ridiculous thing today. All right. Another position I do want to touch on you because the Eagles need to draft someone at some point. They need a third wide receiver. Their first two wide receivers are phenomenal, but we've had our fill of Quez Watkins over the last several years. They'll probably sign another free agent, not high-priced, 1 year, make good contract like they did with Olamide this past year. Take another poke and hope there, see if they can do better. But they need to find a young wide receiver that can be part of the wide receiver mix going forward. The last couple of years, it had to be about Quez because, you need that speed guy to keep the top off the defense, to keep the others playing honest. Yeah, it was a mistake. It has been a mistake. Continues to be a mistake. Can they get it right this time? But if they're still married to you, got to have speed as your third wide receiver, which I'm not, but they probably will be if Sirianni's going to be significantly involved in the offense. Who are the speed guys who are going to be day 3 picks at the earliest?
Yeah, Quez Watkins. What was that commercial? Parquet. Can't believe it's not butter. Did I get that right?
Yes.
So, speed. Listen, Ladd McConkey, no relation to Phil.
Georgia, by the way. Georgia.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, man.
Didn't he play himself into day 2, though? He's not going to be day 3.
I'll tell you what,
day 3. The Eagles are not taking, again, Jody McDonald.
I will say this. When I do my mock draft and I get to the Kansas City Chiefs at 32, Ladd McConkey.
You think he's going in the first round?
I got Ladd McConkey going to the Chiefs. So
that'd be a nice
I think he might be the fastest player in Indianapolis this week. Xavier Worthy out of Texas should give him a run for his money. He's been timed in the 4.2 range. Has a little bit of Hollywood Brown, I think, to his game. That is Xavier Worthy. Roman Wilson out of Michigan, I think, doesn't get talked about enough. His acceleration and burst. When you talk about 3-cone and short shuttle, right? Everybody focuses on the 40. But if you want to know about change of direction and burst and the ability to separate, watch Roman Wilson's 3-cone times and short shuttle. That is going to tell you something. And I think that guy is going to be an excellent slot receiver, probably round 2, maybe early day, round 3. Roman Wilson, I don't know what he's going to run, but he'll be up there. And then Troy Franklin out of Oregon, he's kind of the forgotten guy. Everybody talks about Harrison Neighbors or Dunze up top. Troy Franklin, I think, is somebody who's a first-round wide receiver, as is Brian Thomas Jr. Listen, Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors are not going to do any of the workouts. In fact, Marvin Harrison didn't even do combine training. He's not going to work out at his pro day either.
He's just coming in to shake hands and do his medicals.
Hey, nice to meet you. And he's opened the door
nice
up.
Work if you can get it. Everybody. He doesn't have to do anything. Basically.
Yeah. So that leaves the door open. This Brian Thomas Jr., I think, has a real opportunity here to showcase his size, his speed, his explosiveness. So again, 22 could get real interesting if the Eagles really want to add a playmaker. But I do like the depth here with the wide receiver class. I think you're going to find some value in the middle rounds.
Nobody talks about tight end here in Philly, right? Because Dallas
Yeah.
Goedert is a great tight end. But if you look at history, the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert in the second round when they had Zach Ertz, who was 29 at the time. Dallas Goedert 29, and they don't have anybody behind him. Jack Stoll's restricted. They're probably going to not tender him, bring him back at a lesser number, but he's just a blocking guy. Crank Alcantara hasn't shown much. They did bring back Albert Okwegbanon, but he didn't do anything after being picked up. Any tight ends in that third round range? So you're thinking third round compensatory pick. It'll be at the end of the round, 90s, a 97, 98, somewhere in that range. Any tight ends? It's not a great tight end draft after Bowers, but anybody fit there with some upside?
Yeah, after Bowers, you got Sanders out of Texas, Jatavion Sanders, probably round 2. Eric All out of Iowa, who was injured all year, might sneak into the day 2 range. But I like Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, maybe a more athletic Jack Stoll. I think this is the best dual combination tight end in the draft in terms of being able to block and catch. I think he proved himself capable as a pass catcher. Now, had a couple drops down in Mobile. Other than that, looked pretty good. So I'll probably go back if I'm the Eagles, watch the film, see how often that shows up. The other guy is Cade Stover out of Ohio State. Very similar to Sinnott. Very good blocker. Isn't going to hurt you in the passing attack. So I think those are 2 guys that, the Eagles would look at in the middle rounds. And then if you want a late round kind of like stash on the roster and see where they go, Theo Johnson, not too far away at Penn State. He's a big 6'4", 6'5" target, a little bit raw on the route running, needs to polish up his blocking. But if you can kind of bring that all together, this is a guy with huge upside. Doesn't have to come in and start right away, but he can learn from a Dallas Goedert. So Theo Johnson out of Penn State, and then Isaac Rex from BYU, who I saw at the East-West Shrine Bowl and was also a combine snub. You talk about a guy that's just a red zone weapon. I don't know if he gets drafted or not, but he's one of the top 10 tight ends in my book for this year's draft class.
All right. I'm going to lay this out for you right here, right now. You're not going to be held to this. I'm asking you on the last day of February. You can certainly change your mind between day 1 of the NFL draft and now. Rank the top 3 quarterbacks for me.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to ask me for an Eagles pick. Top 3 quarterbacks for me. This one is hard for me because I think the separation of these 3 young men are really going to be in the personality and the DNA. And that's where, I don't struggle if I'm Chicago because I've already read the tea leaves. Like, if Justin Fields was your guy, right? You've got 48 starts. He's 10-38. He started 50 games. He's in your building. Like, if you had conviction that this is the guy you're going to roll with, it would have been real easy for Ryan Poles to just say that. So it tells me they're going to trade Justin Fields. And to me, like, I like everything more about Caleb Williams except the personality. And I haven't met Caleb Williams. I only know what I've seen on TV, but I've got real questions. And I want to sit down with this young man and really find out, like, what he's about, because the coaches, it was like having an NFL quarterback on the team. He made $10 million in NIL money last year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
This is a new. Yeah, I mean, I think I told this story on Jody's show the other night. Like, I'm talking to a cornerback in the Tropical Bowl. There's no shot of getting drafted, but he made $150,000 in NIL. He's got all the answers. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's the mentality of these guys. But in terms of just pure talent, I think Caleb Williams is the top 5 potential quarterback in 5 years. So that, to me, is number 1. Drake May, I'm going to put number 2 because I do believe right now he can step in and play. I think he's as good as it gets in terms of being game ready. You're going to take some bumps and bruises, I think, with some of the learning curve early on. But I think long run, he's going to be able to stabilize that Commanders football program if they stand pat. Number 3, I flip-flop with May and Jaden Daniels. When you talk about upside and long-term growth, it's funny. Jaden Daniels is several years older, but I think he's just finally starting to come into his own after that 6-year college career. But I mean, his best football is ahead of him. And when you take a look at where the NFL is trending, I was listening to John Harbaugh yesterday. He said, we were ahead of the curve with Lamar Jackson. Now the NFL is catching on. Well, Jaden Daniels has everything that teams are looking for: size, athleticism, the ability to make all the throws. Consistency maybe not as good, but to me, I think Daniels has as great of upside as any quarterback in this year's draft. So that's going to be my 1, 2, and 3 right now. I think if everything stands put, that's how we'll see it. So it's a supply and demand league, and I think half the league would like to upgrade the quarterback position.
Yeah, that's
All
true.
Right, so close. You're saying there's not a great separation between all three of them, but you're going Williams, May, and the Heisman Trophy winner third. I'm going to keep track of it. We're going to have you on like 20 times between now and the draft.
And I'm a big Jaden Daniels guy.
Your opinion.
I'm a big Jaden Daniels guy.
Last week Daniels was 2. This week's May. We'll see what next week holds.
At Rick Serritella, make sure you follow Rick. See it right there on the screen on X, Twitter, doing some great work with the Boston Sports Journal. Greg Bedard up there does tremendous stuff. Dr. Jessica Blinn works there. We get her on the show. She's tremendous, Rick. So you do great work there. I mentioned the Edmonton Elks. I gotta remember. I always wanted to fall to ask.
Buckle up. Get your winter jackets ready.
Edmonton Elks. I expect some swag from the Edmonton Elks, Rick Serritella. And I'll end it with, since Jody went to quarterbacks, I want your thoughts on, because he wasn't asked to do much. So I want your thoughts on JJ McCarthy, where he's going to land, and Eagles pick at 22. Give us one. Give us your early pick at 22.
Yeah, so I think JJ McCarthy has the Denver Broncos written all over him. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I know that he wasn't asked to do as much as some of these other signal callers, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not concerned about the size. I think he can make all the throws. I think he has the it factor when you talk about intangibles and leadership and the leader of men. I like what JJ McCarthy brings to the table. I'm a believer in JJ McCarthy. So that's 4 quarterbacks that I like in this year's draft. In terms of the Eagles, just based on their track record, I think a pass rusher is in the mix. Latu, or Chop Robinson. I think I keep going back to as a potential candidate for the Eagles. However, I do not rule out Howie Roseman trading up. We saw it with Jordan Davis when he identifies a guy he likes.
Oh yeah,
moved up
for Jalen Carter. Does it all the time. Moved up for Devontae Smith. Yeah. Always.
I could see Quinyon Mitchell being the guy they target and trade up for in round 1 if they do go that route. But if they stand pat, I think edge rusher is probably where I'm leaning.
Fair enough. And by the way, for Mr. McCarthy, the quarterback, I know John thinks highly of Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network. Yesterday, comped him to Alex Smith. For me,
Alex won a lot of games, but
that's not a compliment. I'm sorry. Alex Smith was the number 1 pick in the draft. If you look up system quarterback in the dictionary, it's not going to have Brock Purdy's picture. It's going to have Alex Smith's picture. He is a system quarterback. He is a game manager. And if that's JJ McCarthy's comparison for his NFL career,
well, when people comp,
they're
not comping their careers, though. I think you got to be careful. There's just
let me look at it this way, though. If Alex Smith, I say in his prime, at the end of his career, he was playing his best football.
Really good.
If he was still in the league, how many teams would Alex Smith be starting for today?
Yeah, he people forget when Alex figured it out, man. I mean, he had that run with San Francisco and Kansas City. Yeah. Where he was winning games. But I hear what Jody's saying. You never felt that they were a Super Bowl contender. But, man, they won a lot of games. They really did. And I think he gets too much hate. But that's – I hear what Jody's saying. There's a ceiling. And if you're picking a quarterback in the top 10, you probably want that ceiling to be a little bit higher. I'd agree with that.
Nice. Good luck to whoever takes him. If he's got Alex Smith's career headed that way, I wouldn't be using a top 10 pick on that type of quarterback. Rick Serritella, go enjoy the workouts in Indianapolis today. Thank you much for jumping in. We'll get you back up in a couple of weeks. We'll be picking your brain all the way till April, buddy.
Thank you, Mac and Mac.
Thanks, Rick.
Creator of the NFL Draft Bible and All Access Football.com. Rick Serritella here with us on Birds 365. All right, folks, how about I do you a favor? Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call one of their two managing general partners, Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!